Hey everyone, so this is going to be part 2 of my MLP Season 2 rewatch. I'll be starting at episode 10. If you haven't seen part 1, please watch that because I'm going to explain the format of these videos and I give a whole intro there. So if you haven't seen that, please check that out before watching this videos. Again, spoilers for the season, obviously, and this will not be a reaction video. It's a commentary-review video. So yeah, I'll just dive right into it. Secret of My Excess. Again, not a huge fan of this episode. I never really cared for this episode. I thought it was a little silly. One of the things I like about Spike is that he truly cares about all of the main six. And this is shown when he gives his gem to Rarity, even though he wants to eat it, which is really sweet. And his reactions to the presents that he gets from everyone is really sweet, but then he starts getting greedier and greedier, and it goes to his head, and he just gets older and bigger as a result, which doesn't make sense if you've seen kind of like the rest of the series, but whatever. Going into it, I did not care for this episode. I still don't really care for this episode. It's not one that I would want to rewatch, but the ending was kind of cute because Spike remembers the gem that he gave to Rarity out of selflessness, and that's how he kind of just snaps out of everything. So that won some brownie points for me. I thought it was kind of cute. Was a little bit on the nose, but again, I'm kind of a Spike stan, so this episode is not a favorite of mine. Okay, so I know Hearthwarming Eve is kind of a hit or miss for people. I do think it's on the nose, but I've always kind of liked this episode. It gives some nice yet subtle foreshadowing for events that'll happen in future seasons. But from the very beginning, it's clear that cultures or types of ponies in this case may view things differently, and they have to work together if they're going to make it, because otherwise they don't get anywhere. Point is, there are going to be some unreasonable and reasonable people in every identity group, and some people are going to try to stick with their own group or try to reach out and make connections. Frankly, I think that either position is reasonable, but when it comes to surviving in the long run, we're all in this together. No, I'm not going to start singing, but no matter where we go, even if it's a new land or a new beginning, there will always be conflict. Dang, I'm going way too deep into this, and I'm probably overthinking it, but I definitely would not have seen this as a child. But in all seriousness, the so-called leaders of each clan, or each identity group in this case, fight over a rock. That's how territorial they are, and this just causes the storm that everyone's trapped in to get even worse, because they're only willing to point fingers at each other, and that's why they end up becoming solid ice. I've also learned a little bit about Wendigos, and while this is not exactly aligned with the folklore that I've looked into, the representation of torment is very apparent. But at the end of the day, some people are going to acknowledge that we are all people, or in this case ponies, and should be treated as such. We don't have to be best friends, but we should be supporting each other for simply being ponies or people, whatever. But we don't have to be all cute and cuddly with everyone, but directly or indirectly we should be supporting everyone, because at the end of the day we are living on this planet or in this world or whatever you want to say. I also really like that ancient traditions are a big part of this episode. Like many songs can come from a meaningful event or message. And overall, I just think it's a cute and fun episode with a pretty solid message behind it. I know it's not really that big in terms of plot, but I thought it was cute. Okay, honestly, I know this episode isn't super standoffish in the fandom, but Granny Smith is one of my favorite characters, and this episode actually made me really emotional. Granny Smith kind of reminds me of my grandma when she was alive. A little loopy and a little out of it at times, but deep down a very intelligent lady with a lot of knowledge and wisdom to share. I unfortunately didn't really realize this until it was too late. So I really saw a lot of myself in Apple Bloom this episode, and it made me sad, but it also made me happy. So Granny Smith has all kind of these rituals and stuff to make sure that Zap Apple Jam, which is like a seasonal thing, can be perfect. She wants it to be perfect, but unfortunately Diamond Tiara witnesses this and makes fun of Granny Smith and Apple Bloom in this process. Of course, this makes Apple Bloom insecure and embarrassed. I mean, that's normal. Grandparents can be embarrassing. It's kind of their job. And I find that looking back on these quote-unquote embarrassing moments is actually kind of cute. To each their own, but I love thinking back on moments with my grandparents. But I have to admit, Diamond Tiara's dad, Filthy Rich, is actually kind of chill. We later learn that Diamond Tiara's behavior comes from somebody else, but that's for another episode. I do feel bad for Apple Bloom. It's awkward being around somebody who's a little goofy when you're younger, and I would freak out if I saw my grandma covered with bees too, so we shared that sentiment. But here comes the family appreciation part. This was always an awkward subject for me. I mean, my birth family is all the way in Guatemala and isn't always accessible, so when I have time to get up and talk to them, it's usually very brief. So when I go to school and then present about a bunch of white people for 20 minutes, it gets a little bit awkward because people are like, that's not your family. But, you know, again, chosen, blood, adopted, it's your family at the end of the day. But Apple Bloom's situation is a little different. But my point was, I do understand her nerves. Honestly, I liked the CMCs in this episode. They're really good friends and they'll do anything. They go to lengths to help Apple Bloom get out of this. And even though it backfires on them, I give them major props for trying. Granny Smith does end up presenting to the class, and it's revealed that she has a really interesting backstory. Her family was on the road as seed collectors. Oh, I can't talk. And they were directed to open land thanks to Princess Celestia, but they had to live it rough because of a shortage of food. And Granny Smith ends up going into the Everfree Forest in an attempt to get some chow, and that's where she finds the Zap Apples. So while she's chased off in the end by Timberwolves, this starts the tradition of Zap Apple harvesting, and suddenly her little rituals at the beginning make sense. You gotta do what you gotta do to get good Zap Apple Jam. And it turns out that Granny Smith's Zap Apple Jam created a place for ponies to come and go and founded Ponyville itself. So while Granny Smith can be a little silly and goofy sometimes, like, she had a lot of influence in starting a new town. Her family basically started this town indirectly, and Granny Smith gets the respect she deserves. Apple Bloom accepts her for who she is, and everybody, like, is now appreciating her. Then, looking back on it, I remembered that I did a lot of fun stuff with my grandma too. I'd help her cook, and we'd make a lot of fun recipes, like cupcakes and this like cauliflower dish I loved doing with her. But once she got sick and started losing her memory, I was kind of self-conscious, and I wanted to avoid her because it made me uncomfortable and sad to be around her. I didn't understand why. I was, 7 through 13 in this time period. I wish that I was able to come around and appreciate my grandma even when she wasn't at her sharpest, because she, like Granny Smith, was just a very smart and impactful lady. And dang, is My Little Pony really making me cry right now. But it really is that time of the year. But anyways, one of my favorite episodes. I will fight anyone who says otherwise. I don't care. It'll always be one of my favorites. It's kind of a comfort episode for me. I also like that pretty much all the kids are accepting, and even Diamond Tiara ends up getting roped in to all the rituals. So we all win. I love this episode. Granny Smith's one of my faves. It gives us a really neat backstory to a character that was just kind of a goofy side character until now. So yeah, I love this episode. Okay, this next episode has a big nod to responsibility, and another reason why, at least in this mindset, I will never have kids. My germophobia won't even let me near diapers. But point is, Pinkie Pie is a really great, playmate for the Cake's new twins, but understandably, the Cakes are reluctant to let her actually babysit them on her own. Dang, that caterpillar was hungry. But eventually they are forced to agree to let Pinkie Pie babysit, but unfortunately the twins proved to be very difficult to take care of. I cannot believe I forgot about that scene. Like when I saw it, I literally cackled. But Pumpkin Cake has a habit of eating everything in sight. Pound Cake likes smashing things, and dang, he's strong because he just breaks the tub faucet, and the only thing that cheers the twins up is by dumping flour all over Pinkie Pie. Honestly, the part where Twilight comes in really ticked me off. Like, at first I was like, oh, it's nice of her to help, and maybe she can help Pinkie Pie kind of get things together and learn how to take care of babies in a more efficient way, but she just ends up being really rude and condescending. Like, technically she is right, Pinkie Pie was struggling and maybe wasn't cut out for babysitting at the beginning, but she's like really mean about it, and it's like, oh, I figured that this might happen, and some ponies just aren't cut out for this responsibility. And I was like, oh my gosh, Twilight, you are so mean.
I mean, you're not wrong, but you didn't have to say it.
And rightfully, Pinkie is ticked and kicks Twilight out. I would too, against my better judgment. So they both just end up looking stupid in that scene. But yeah, honestly, I don't care for this episode, and it proves to me that I would never want to take care of babies on my own. Like, I at least have to have somebody with me who is okay with changing diapers and cleaning up puke, because I cannot. Because the Pinkie Pie breakdown would definitely happen to me if I was in that situation, and I don't think a baby would throw flour on itself to cheer me up in real life. The ending is cute. Props to Pinkie Pie for pulling it together in the end, but like, this episode has its funny moments, but I just don't really care for it. Okay, this next episode, I completely forgot about it. Like, I remember seeing bits and pieces of it and not really caring for it, other than the infamous, like,
No! Make it stop! Make it stop!
Lady, you're trouble.
make it stop, and Lady, Your Trouble scene. I didn't remember much other than the cherries. Surprisingly, because apparently this is a fan favorite. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this might be a fan favorite and a more iconic episode. It has a bit of a slow start, but I do like the AJ appreciation. But then it turns out that, like, she's not coming back, and like there's this whole issue with that. She never came back from the rodeo she went to, but her friends are like, we are going to go get her. I love the nod to I Love Lucy with the cherries and like the thing going faster and faster and them not being able to keep up. I thought that was really funny. But this episode, I really enjoyed it, but there were some moments that I didn't like sorry. I would also be really ticked if my friends started interrogating me, especially if they ended up making a huge mess and exploding cherries all over me. I do suppose that that's not the worst thing to be exploded on somebody, but I still, like, I don't like the idea of interventions. They freak me out. I would rather somebody, like, individually reach out and people individually reach out to me one by one, just because I feel like if people have an intervention, I feel like I'm getting ganged up on, and then I get defensive and aggressive, and then I just end up cutting off all my friends. I don't know if I do that now, but I would definitely do that in middle school. I would just be like, oh, you don't agree with me? Okay, then you're not my friend, go away. But nowadays, I still feel like I'd be getting ganged up on, but nah. Chimichurri is a great name, by the way. Or is it Cherry Chimichanga? I don't know. I forgot. I'm a terrible fan. And I do want to try some kumquats, by the way. After that being mentioned, I want cherries and kumquats. But is Applejack right? Did she technically not break her promise because she never actually ended up having breakfast? Because I don't recall her promising to go to breakfast and explain everything. She said, at breakfast, I will explain. I don't know. It's confusing. Whatever. I love the chase scene. It's hilarious. I'm not going to cover it in depth because otherwise this is going to be way too long. Another reason why interventions aren't good for me, I would just run away. But in this case, I'm glad that they did have an intervention with her, because I'd be worried if one of my best friends just went missing and had no explanation. It does turn out that Applejack didn't win the prize money at the rodeo and feels like a failure because she didn't win any of the things, like any of the events. But her friends and the town care more about her than the money. And I think that's an important message. Your true friends and your family aren't going to use you for money if they care about you. They should care more about you than your accomplishments and the money that you bring home. Absolutely, 100%. And the fact that they proved that at the end is really, really sweet. Like, we love AJ for being AJ, not for bringing back money. Hey, an episode about scams in a kids show. Seriously though, this episode always made me kind of upset because I feel bad for Rainbow Dash. She never really got the cider that she wanted. But dang, that cider must be good. And now I really, really want apple cider because I love apple stuff. But Pinky annoyed me in this episode because why would you give your plan to a bunch of random ponies and not your besties? Plot. No other reason, in my opinion. Or maybe she's just Pinky. I don't know. Also, I do think it's really rude to buy more than one, like, mug of cider when there's a shortage and there's, like, so many people that want some. But I guess if you have the money, then oh well. I do feel like they should have had a rule where it was, like, you could only get one at the beginning and then come back for more at the end. But sheesh, yeah, for sure. Pinkie Pie does end up sharing at the end, so what's the point? Like, this whole thing could have been avoided. But if somebody bragged like she did at the beginning, I would definitely fight them. And I've never been in a physical altercation, so I don't know how that'd turn out, but I would definitely be ticked. I stand Fluttershy for being unproblematic throughout this episode. And also, why is Cheerly mad in that big, like, angry scene? Because she had already gotten her cider. Come on, Cheerly. Whatever. Yeah, I don't really care for a lot of this episode, and Flim and Flam in general, but, because they're arrogant and annoying, and I just don't like that. Their song is very catchy, though. But they want to drive Sweet Apple Acres out of business, which is not cool and super gross. And they end up challenging them to, like, a cider making contest. And obviously they're going to win. Like, machines are just going to do so much more. But I appreciate that the main six teamed up with the Apple family and really did beat the odds at the end of the day, because Flim and Flam got way too cocky and had to resort to making really cruddy cider. And that bites them in the butt because nobody wants their nasty product now. And now there's plenty of cider to go around. So I guess this is a subtle nod to the people that worked hard to provide products for people. And I guess it's a kind of message to maybe support small businesses that really make good products, because even if they're not part of a big corporation, they deserve the credit, and not all big corporations may be as high quality as they seem. That's kind of what I took away from it, but it's probably not that deep. Honestly, I wouldn't mind being stuck in bed. I could make more videos and do some writing. However, being injured and sick and stuck in a place that's not your own, yeah. I definitely understand Rainbow Dash being bored and ticked off, and as somebody who does have sensory issues and has trouble staying focused, again, like I said, I hate reading. Not because I think it's uncool, I just have trouble concentrating, but I love stories, so I'm definitely not in agreement with the whole egghead thing. Anyway, classic Rainbow Dash episode. I guess I like how she's able to relate to a character, or in a future season we find out an actual person. And how stories can draw somebody in. And some people will click with some stories, some people won't. Like, it's just how it is. I like that Rainbow Dash at the end of the day comes to terms that being an egghead is okay. But it's just some of these lengths she goes to are ridiculous. Like, couldn't she have just bought it or ordered it on her own, or like stolen it, Dash borrowed from Twilight without telling her, or just like taken it when she left the hospital? Like, instead of hiding under the bed, maybe she could have just like swiped it and left. I mean, stealing, I guess, isn't friendshipy enough, but, and maybe Rainbow Dash cheat. But I I mean, the funniest scene to me was that one scene where she's just like sitting there and then just starts eating to get her friends to leave. I love that scene. It's so funny. Because I'd hate to be in a hospital like that. And have my friends just like staring at me. So that scene always cracked me up as a kid and still does to this day. But I guess you could say, like Rainbow Dash, I was more interested in Daring Do's story than the episode itself. And Rainbow Dash just looks kind of stupid in this episode. So yeah, not my favorite, but I do like aspects of it. Okay, Hearts and Hooves Day. This episode is funny and it's a classic, but here's a message. If you take anything away from this, please let it be this. Do not set your siblings or your teachers up with somebody unless you know for sure that they like each other. I actually really like Big Mac and Shirley's interactions, and it's proof that it's totally fine to just be good friends. Not everyone needs to be in a romantic relationship, at least not yet for Big Mac, and adults often know what's going on even if kids think they're being sneaky. Unfortunately, a little history lesson from Twilight causes the CMCs to make a love potion, and if you've read Harry Potter or any other magic story, you should know that love potions don't create real love and never turn out well, because then things get really creepy and really sappy. And no, I'm not just a salty single college student. This is genuinely disturbing, and especially if you know both Ponies Dash people involved. Luckily, the girls find an antidote, but they come on, just do not do this in real life because it can cause so much drama. Yes, the Smile, Smile, Smile episode with the donkeys. The wholesome song that made some crazy fan make a video that traumatized me as a child, but we're not going to get into that. You know, I don't think I've actually watched this episode for a long time until now, and honestly, I vibe with it because not everyone's too keen on Pinky's endless optimism and we have to be friends kind of thing. I'm definitely not as cranky as Cranky Doodle Donkey. I almost said Dandy. But I would be really mad if somebody just jumped in my face and started getting all over my stuff. Pinky, nothing against Pinky. I actually do love Pinky, but sometimes she annoys the heck out of me, and unfortunately she's been annoying the heck out of me a lot this season. Sometimes friendships don't happen right away, and sometimes they just don't happen at all. Some people just don't click, and sometimes too much friendliness can be too much for somebody, and trying too hard can make people more annoyed with you rather than want to be friends with you. Especially, here's an example. If somebody snatched my wig, announced it to everyone, destroyed my stuff, and then continued to not respect my privacy, I would drop them. Again, I love Pinky, but she'd annoy the heck out of me, and she'd annoy me a lot. I'm a generally quiet and less upbeat person until I get to know you. Then I kind of start to open up and branch out and be a little more crazy, but I would not forgive somebody if they just destroyed my crap and then annoyed me with apologies without really listening to what I had to say at all. So I really sympathize with Cranky. There's some debate in the fandom whether Pinky actually learned a lesson here, but either way, I'm glad she kind of went through this situation because she really needed to learn, not everyone's gonna click with you right away. You are annoying to some people. Not everybody is going to be your friend. That's just not how the world works. I don't know if she completely learns this, but she seems to kind of mellow out a little bit in the end. She does end up doing something super sweet by reuniting him with his old special someone. That backstory was adorable, and no, this definitely didn't make me emotional at all. No, it didn't. But I'm really glad I rewatched it because this was a super cute episode. Now, this episode I definitely remembered. It's another reason why I cannot have children. Because if they were picky eaters...
I think tonight I want some cereal. Hey!
Of course, I would not actually do this, but this is why I just don't like thinking about this kind of stuff, because this would drive me nuts. I do understand there are disorders and things. I would never apply this to actual children, but if somebody threw a tantrum like that, I'd be like, okay, fine. No dinner for you tonight. Nope. I love Fluttershy, but she is such a doormat. And that would drive me nuts because I used to be a doormat too. When I was younger, I thought, if I'm nice to everybody, they'll be nice to me. Nope. I learned that at a very young age and then thus became much more closed off. Rarity and Pinkie try to help, but their methods are a little bit questionable and it doesn't work out so great for Fluttershy. Angel deserves to get slapped. I stand by that. And Fluttershy, keep your mouth shut because he was going to eat it anyway before you mentioned that there was no cherry. Sheesh. I guess learning some techniques from a Minotaur about standing up for herself was good for her, but then she ends up taking it too far. Like, at first it kind of seems justified, especially to the rude ponies that she ends up confronting. Like, talk and walk, people, and if you cut in line, even if it's to be with your friends, you're a rude person and you're not that special. You're not entitled to that. I hate people that just like duck in line and cut for their friends. Like, it's really annoying. But later, Fluttershy ends up making Rarity and Pinkie cry and just being a bully. So at the end, she learns you can assert yourself without being a jerk. Pinkie and Rarity do so as well. Again, not the most conventional methods, but for the sake of the show, it works quite well. And Fluttershy stands up to Iron Will without getting nasty and is just like, no means no. And that's the lesson. No means no. You can say no without getting nasty, and it's something you need to learn how to do. Yeah, another episode I didn't really care for. Once again, Twilight is overacting about scheduling. It's very important to be on top of things, especially if you're busy and go, 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 like Twilight, but she ends up dooming herself. She doesn't listen to the future version of herself and nerds out, which ends up biting her in the butt. Because, girl, pay attention. If your future self comes to you, you should probably listen. Like, sometimes I love my girl Twilight, sometimes she annoys the heck out of me. I'm a Greek mythology nerd, and I got really angry by the way she said Tartarus.
Tartarus.
But I also got annoyed by the fact, like, if your future has been revealed, don't try to stop it, because you're usually just digging your own grave, which is another Greek mythology thing. Basically, Twilight attempts to stop the future and ends up screwing herself over and making her, like, herself look like an idiot, which is hilarious to watch, honestly, especially when she discovers how goofy she looks in the end. And the first time I watched this, I watched the episodes out of order, and I saw the finale of this season before this episode, so I was expecting the guard that shows up to be Shining Armor, and I thought he was just gonna say, Twilight! So the first time I watched this, I was very unpleasantly surprised by that. But overall, this episode is a good Greek mythology lesson. Don't tempt fate. It's already sealed. Okay, I think I'm gonna end off this episode here. I think maybe the third part is gonna be a little bit shorter, but I have a lot to say about the finale. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you agreed with me, leave a comment. If you disagree with me, leave a comment. I love to hear other people's thoughts about this show. And yeah, I just ask that you be respectful when voicing your opinions. And I hope I'll see y'all for part 3.